All right, so we are live. Sarah, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, I had actually reached out to you on Instagram a number of months back after I came across on my feed. There was an article that you had written on your website called "Why I Quit My Dream Job," and I was wondering if you'd be able to talk about that experience and what that dream job was. And we'll start there.
Okay, cool. Well, so ever since I was little, my dream job has always been to become a mysterious park ranger. And I say
Mysterious.
mysterious because a lot of people will go their whole lives without seeing a park ranger because um, over the last couple decades, they've kind of fizzled out and the jobs haven't really been there. So there's a lot of people who don't think that they even exist. But I did know because I had seen them traveling in the US and going as a kid to different national parks and meeting rangers. And I knew that that's kind of what I wanted to do. So I spent a lot of my younger years kind of taking courses, going through all the training I needed to qualify for a role like that. So it was lots of like backcountry experience, and luckily I grew up in a family where we did lots of camping and we were always put into sports and able to kind of explore that side of nature. Um, so yeah, and then I joined search and rescue kind of in Squamish to get some of the training and experience to be able to be out in the backcountry and be self-sufficient and not be a liability. So I did that and then landed my dream job, and that was to work for BC Parks as a ranger on the South Coast. And I got the Pemberton area, which is covers a little bit of Garibaldi Park, and then some parks up kind of past Pemberton in the Duffy area. So I did that for 5 years. And yeah, it just eventually a lot of the kind of dark side of parks came to light. And yeah, I had to quit my dream job
Yeah.
and kind of left there with like obviously sort of mourning the loss of that job, because not only was it something that I worked really hard to get, but it was sort of like identity defining. So I felt like who I was for a long time was Ranger Sarah, and I think I even had that on my Instagram for a long time. Um, and yeah, it definitely felt like a huge loss. I mean, there were rangers that I worked with that were like 16 years in and ended up leaving, so I left pretty soon. But also things had deteriorated quite quickly, especially in that office. And there's some articles have just come out about work safe claims that are going on right now with some infractions. So yeah, it definitely was a really tough situation, but kind of a chance to bring to light things that are going very wrong in our park system.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had read that at the time when you were doing in Squamish the search and rescue, you started as a volunteer and you were the youngest at the time. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think there was one guy that was maybe a month or two older than me, and then I was the youngest on the team. So for Squamish SAR, it's all volunteer, so you never get paid, which is kind of crazy because it's basically like another full-time job. And I mean, it doesn't have to be, it's just that because of the nature of the types of rescues and the training you need, if you don't show up, then you become kind of part of the problem. So you have to make sure that you're devoting a lot of time to it. So yeah, I did 7 years on Squamish SAR. I've taken a leave now, so because it was taking up just so much of my life and not really being able to enjoy a lot of the sports that I love, because I saw a lot of things that obviously are triggering. So I'm taking some time to start to enjoy sports again. Never really stopped enjoying them, but definitely became overly cautious of a lot of things, and saw a lot of terrible accidents um, and some deaths and things that definitely will stick with me for a while. So I've decided 7 years is enough time. So I'm going to take a step back from that world for a bit. But yeah, definitely like amazing experience, and I've gained a lot of skills that I didn't have before with both the job and with SAR. So yeah.
And what sort of things, you're totally right. I've been in some BC parks. I'm new to BC, but I don't think I've ran into any rangers. I don't think. So what sort of things did you learn in the search and rescue portion of your career, and then also maybe describe to people what it is that falls under the scope of a park ranger?
Yeah, so search and rescue and being a BC park ranger are obviously different. So like you're not, just because you're ranger doesn't mean you're on a search and rescue team. You'll probably be involved in rescues, but it's not like a prereq that you need to do that. It just helps obviously with like understanding the process. And because South Coast parks are so incredibly busy, it helps to have that knowledge because you're probably going to be involved in a SAR call. So on the SAR side of things, there's a variety of roles. So usually you start on the team and you're kind of all on the same level as a member in training, and you start with just being a ground search and rescue member, which means you're just like, you're helping out, you're attending you're attending as many calls as you can, but you're not doing like an overly specialized skill. You're probably like helping with a stretcher carry or cleaning up or organizing gear or driving a truck, something like that. And then as you progress on the team, you can specialize in different areas. So I was on the avalanche response team and the rope rescue team. And then I also served 2 terms on the board of directors, which I was the youngest, but it was a great experience. So I learned a lot about the whole process and the ins and outs of how those organizations function, which was super interesting. And then obviously that's volunteer, and you just basically, we don't have pagers, but we have like a paging system that's attached to our phones. So we just get like a text message being like, you need to be here right now. And then kind of gives you like a quick synopsis of what the rescue is, and then you show up. And that's kind of it for the roles of SAR. And then for a ranger in the day-to-day life, it's different every single day, and it depends on the park. So a lot of like the usual tasks that you would think, like trail maintenance, cleaning up dirty backcountry outhouses, dealing with situations with wildlife. Unfortunately, on the South Coast, it basically all boils down in the end to just people management because parks are so overcrowded. So my jobs kind of started out with a lot of the kind of like exciting things about being a ranger. So like being out on the trail and learning about, you know, like doing interpretive programming, learning about wildlife, working with the conservation officer service a little bit. And then it kind of just like slowly started going downhill as parks like ramped up and got busier and busier. And basically we just became like full-time, I'd say full-time babysitters, because the types of crowds we're getting in the South Coast region are not necessarily that educated when it comes to backcountry etiquette and safety and, you know, just how to be in those environments. So yeah, it was a lot of standing in parking lots and directing traffic, writing tickets, which obviously started to weigh on me in the end because it just felt like no matter how much you said or did, you couldn't keep up with just all the situations that were unfolding around you. And obviously that boils down to like a lack of staffing, a lack of public education, BC Parks focusing on priorities that don't necessarily help the longevity of those systems. So
Yeah, totally. And I want to, there's actually a good segue to, I clipped out a part of the article why I quit my dream job. So I just want to read it, and then we can dive into it a little bit. So it starts with, my first couple seasons were overwhelming to say the least, but completely glorious. I cruised the trails with stamina and excitement. I talked to every park visitor and tried to educate and interpret the best I could. I really felt like I belonged out there, like the park somehow summoned me for its protection. As time passed, though, things changed. The workload increased, the park use numbers skyrocketed, and these beautiful sacred places began to feel like a Best Buy on Boxing Day. Side note, I've worked at a Best Buy on Boxing Day, controlling the line, and it was an absolute nightmare. and everyone didn't follow the rules. As soon as the door
Yeah.
opened, there was a line around the side of the building. This was in Winnipeg. This was years ago. And there was a huge snowfall. People started lining up at like 4 in the morning. I think the doors
Yeah.
opened at like 8. So people were already there for 4 hours. And then as soon as the doors opened, people that were in the parking lot, they just ran in and just cut the line. And it was a disaster. It was so disgusting. I just had to share that story to like illuminate. I can't imagine that happening out in
Yeah.
nature in our beautiful parks out in BC. So anyway,
Yeah, I
side tangent.
definitely.
So it goes on by saying, I began to feel a change within myself. A negative pressure was building. No matter how fast or hard I worked, it was never enough. No matter how many hours I spent on the trailhead or in the park, educating people continued to abuse the park. I was slowly starting to feel like an underpaid babysitter at a very disobedient parade of children. And there's other
That's
good
pretty
parts.
far.
Yeah, there's other good parts that I wanted to pull out as well, but that one kind of, I think, paints a really good picture of a summary of when you first started to when you
Yeah.
left, and just like how it started to weigh on you. Um,
Mhm.
what, in my mind, it doesn't make sense why this just seems like a resource allocation or misallocation problem from the government. Why over
Mhm.
time was like funding cut? Was that just government not prioritizing that, and then there was less staff, and then an increase in demand, but like the supply
Mhm.
of rangers was diminishing? Like what was going on there?
Yeah, basically, you kind of have to get political in a sense to understand it, but it hasn't just been like the last 5 years that funding's been cut. It's basically been cut for a couple decades now. And it is just government prioritizing where money goes. But it's also mismanagement. So we could receive funding, but because there's a lot of hands in that pot and a lot of decisions that get made um, without the boots on the ground giving the feedback, um, yeah, it kind of gets wasted. So as much as people come to me and say like, oh, we need to fund BC Parks, well, yeah, we need to fund BC Parks, but we need to know that the people in charge of using that funding are going to put it towards projects that like produce change, not projects that, like it was great when we had the student ranger program, but that wasn't what we needed. We needed people that were actually trained and skilled and were able to go into the parks and make a difference, where that program offered a lot of great experience for young people, but we could have used that funding in a lot of other areas. And for us, for people who have been working and kind of like, struggling to achieve things and get funding for projects that are pretty like high on the priority list, that was kind of like a kick in the back to be like, well, we could have really used that money for something else, to maybe hire some more rangers so that, parks could actually be protected by the stewards that are supposed to be there. So yeah, so it's just been like a variety of things, and whoever, is in charge politically has a lot of say whether or not parks are going to suffer or not. But yeah, it hasn't been good for the last decade. So
Yeah, and it sounds like there's a disconnect between the people in charge from the frontline workers, and
yeah.
there's a misalignment there.
Yeah, there's a lot of people sitting around with fancy notebooks that aren't really willing to put themselves out on the line to make change. I think this is in like a lot of government process. I don't plan to get hired by the government again, so I'm just gonna say I think that there's a lot of people that are sitting around with like, making fancy brochures, but work's actually getting done. So for instance, there was like the Joffrey Lakes Provincial Park. There was a management plan that came out and it had a ton of these amazing ideas, like we're gonna, offer these awesome Indigenous steward programs, we're gonna increase facilities and staffing and blah blah blah. But then, nothing ever comes of it. Like they make it on paper and it looks great, they get public feedback, but I continued on for another season, never saw any of those improvements. Everything was just always a band-aid solution. And then of course COVID happened, and it was a perfect out for them to be like, let's just close the park and not deal with it. And yeah, I do think that's a tactic by BC Parks to just keep pushing and pushing funding and making changes in that specific park. And for reference, for anyone who's never been to Joffrey Lakes, we would see on average about 180, 190,000 people over 4 months. So that's like 2,500 to 3,000 people a day on a 5 kilometer out and back trail, with a camping area that should only have about maybe 15 to 25 tents. We'd see probably 75 tents there. So yeah, there was always Band-Aid solutions that came up, like trying to have a shuttle service, but that failed miserably. And I didn't hear a lot of great feedback about a lot of the other initiatives they tried to do last summer just after I left. Yeah, there's just a lot of Band-Aids in that organization that tear off pretty quickly.
And I've actually spent some time working with board of directors as well. And what did that experience teach you or open your eyes to?
For SAR, that's where, yeah. Well, a lot of things, I think. I learned a lot about like funding and how the whole process of getting grants and different donations from groups works, because obviously with search and rescue groups in BC, a lot of it comes from donations and funding from the government. So I learned a lot about that process, a lot about just like how the structure of management works and working with like different groups of people. I don't know. It was like, it was pretty chill being on that board, because most of the people you had worked with as like members and gone on lots of tasks with. But I would love to sit on a board of, like for BC Parks, it would have been quite interesting, I think.
Totally.
But
yeah, each organization is a little bit, well, each organization will be different because it's different people that are on the board, and it alternates as well over, whatever the term timelines are. But I think that when you have a really strong board, hopefully the intent is that you then have strong leadership, and then the board kind of guides the leadership, and then hopefully the leadership, it trickles down all the way to the frontline workers.
There definitely was some, even with SAR, there definitely was some divide between board and membership, because obviously, the board's got to make some decisions that the membership isn't always super comfortable with. So I definitely kind of learned a bit about that process and how that must work even with bigger organizations. But I'm not sure how it works with BC Parks, because I'm sure that there's just a lot of different hands in that pot, and so making decisions and coming up with better processes is not that easy.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think for a long time people have been sort of blindfolded to the fact that it's not just funding that is stopping these things from happening and from parks being protected. It is people making decisions. So I think when people try to come up with different solutions, even like it's great when there's community groups that go out and have fundraisers for BC Parks, but they don't know where the money's going and who's going to be, deciding how it plays out. So yeah, people definitely need to be aware that even if suddenly BC Parks got a whole bunch of funding tomorrow, doesn't mean that there's going to be positive changes for parks, because there needs to be the right people sitting there making those decisions.
Yeah, it can't just be
right now. It's a very stagnant group of people.
Yeah, it can't be greenwashing, saying, "Oh yeah, we're doing all these nice things," but in actuality, a fraction or none of them are actually getting executed on.
Yeah, and there's a lot of rangers that have left that I know eventually will speak up about things, but there's a lot that have left and have had the exact same experience and just been like, either they stayed as long as they could and then finally they had to leave, or they left for another opportunity. But at the end of the day, it's all the same. Everyone's speaking the same language. We're all saying that, rangers were just not valued, and when they tried to bring up projects and things that would help improve parks, management was never having it. So we'd always write these huge ranger reports at the end of the season with kind of like everything we observed, and we'd come back, because they'd lay us off obviously in October, and we'd come back for the following season and literally nothing would be different. And I think that was the most disheartening thing, was like, okay, we've brought all these things forward, like you guys have got 6 months to help us achieve some of these like pretty detrimental situations that need to be handled. And we'd come back and they'd be like, oh, we didn't even open it. And you're like, wow, like glad I wasted that entire summer trying to better parks. But yeah, so I think, I mean, I would love to see like some crazy documentary about just exposing how that system works. But yeah, we'll see.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that just comes down to it just comes down to culture and being able to like that's a culture change. And I think that's a people change that is required to make that culture change. Because I've worked in workplaces, different job environments, and there's something to when you work in a really great work environment where your ideas are not only valued, but you actually see them being implemented. And then I've been in workplaces where I've been micromanaged and, ideas come forth, but really it's just like a dictator wanting someone to just do whatever it is they think is best. And they don't really want someone bringing forth ideas. And that is just the most soul crushing environment to work in, and it weighs on you. And I think one common thing that you and I have is that we're both like optimists. I get that sense, but then also I think very realistic as well. And when you're placed in that type of work environment, it just like chisels away at you over time. And so I think as hard as that decision, and I imagine that was a very hard decision to quit, I think it was the right choice. And long term, I think it was the right choice.
Yeah, and I think like coming out of it and being like kind of like a year away from it now, I look back and I'm like, well, no one else, like I know so many people, like even partner rangers that I worked with that, moved on and were just like, I can't even talk about it. Like it's just like such a letdown. I'm glad that at least I could get out and then start talking about it and start the conversation, because, if people never know, then and the expectation is so huge, right? Like the expectation when you apply for the job is that you're going to be this like super decked out human being that can like hike, like 2x4s on each shoulder with like a bag of concrete into the backcountry and be this like amazing, like verbally skilled, like ninja that's going to be able to go out and deal with conflict, but also, have all like your self-sufficient skills to be in the backcountry. But then the expectation, then you get into the job and you're like, really, it's so hard to get, then you get there and that just starts like beating you down, because you're like, all these skills that I worked so hard to build up don't even really matter, because now I'm just being like plugged into a parking lot to do crowd control. And so there's no like reward in the end. You're just like, you kind of build it up like it's going to be this amazing experience, and then they have huge expectations and you have huge expectations, and then there's just there's no great outcome for anyone. And people always like, I remember, I can't even count the number of times people would be like passing me on the trail and they'd look at me and be like, wow, like you're the best job. And I'd be like, there's a lot to this job that you don't know about. Like what you see seems like the super romantic idea, but there's a lot of things going on like mentally and physically with rangers that you'll just have no idea unless you're in it. So, I mean, I would never trade the experience. I'm really glad I did it. And I mean, it was like a personal achievement for me, something that I always wanted to do. So I just am sad that the outcome, and I mean, I think I'm sad with like a lot of things in the world, but also just sad that like a job that can seem so wholesome and so important is kind of just crap. At the end of the day, because it even felt like sometimes like with or without you, it was like you weren't really making a difference being in that park.
Feel like a lost cause and not be able to contribute to
on
it.
The coast.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to reach out to you and give people a chance to hear your story. One, I don't think it's the only story, like it's not just unique to you, and I think BC has, coming from Manitoba, you look at BC and it's it is a richer province, but there's tourism and it's shining the light on just over tourism and its effects on the environment, and it's not all what you see in the tourist posters or those brochures that you see about coming to the beautiful outdoors, like it comes at a cost. And I think it's really important to highlight your story and experience and let others hear about it, because hopefully it will affect some sort of change in some way.
Yeah, and I mean, even with like that article, so I like posted that on my personal blog, and then a year later, Mountain Life Media posted it on theirs, and it kind of like sparked the whole conversation again, because it was like a whole kind of other audience that was able to see it. And there was just some people that reached out and were like, I worked in like this sector of government, is like, I'm not biased, or there would be people like, I have no idea that it was like this, and like I was gonna apply to be a ranger, and so it's definitely started a lot of conversation, which is obviously the kind of the catalyst for changes starting to talk about it. So yeah, I'm hoping that something good comes out of it eventually, or at least it just gets exposed enough that people start getting more passionate about making some changes.
Totally. You're breaking up a little bit, but that could just be the connection. What sort of things did you put in the document that were some of the changes that you thought would be beneficial to make, if you can share them?
Yeah, it's not breaking up too much. You're up now.
Am I breaking up too?
Yeah, I can. I don't know. Oh, I'll just give it a go. Let me just stop me if it gets too choppy.
I'll put my hand up.
Okay. So every season at the end of the year, we put together like a ranger report, and that would kind of be like our one chance to be like, these are all the things we saw over the summer, and obviously we would bring them up in every meeting, but these are kind of like the documented things that we would hope would get changed for the following season. A lot of the times it would be things like, we'd love to have more staffing because, it's the workloads are too large, and it would be nice to have a partner out in that country to deal with situation A, B, C. There would be requests for like, projects that didn't get finished to get more funding to do them. Say if you were doing like a boardwalk or some renovations on an outhouse or something, you'd be like, can we increase the budget next year so that, it's not falling apart after it gets just slightly hit by some snow or something. Can we like not cut corners and put some real money into these projects? There were things like obviously Joffrey specific issues. So can we put in some sort of like permit system? So, I mean, for the last 5 years have been like, let's work on a lottery. There's been tons of parks that have successfully worked on lotteries. And I do think Joffrey is going to have to be that kind of park, because there really is, because it's in such a, like rural area. It's not like you just have these facilities. Like we don't just have this building that we can, open and close the gate and all. I mean, we could, if there was funding to build like a gatehouse and something like that, which I'm sure is the direction that they'll go eventually. But yeah, having some sort of lottery system where we could minimize the impact to that park. That's kind of what I'd always push for. And then I'd, like lay out plans of like, well, we could put this here, put a gate here, do that, whatever. There would be lots of different things as far as like wildlife attractants. So a few years ago, we didn't have any bear hangs up at Joffrey, so we just had this like bin. I don't actually think there is bear hangs anymore, because I think they never got put up and then they got swept into the lake during an avalanche. So anyway, we had this bear bin, which was useless because people just shoved their garbage into it. They never actually stored their food in it. They just shoved garbage on their way out. So we would go hike up there, open it up, and it would just be filled with like moldy food and whatever. So my always on my list would be to get rid of that, because it was a wildlife attractant. It was, gross to haul out bags of garbage on your back that were leaking. And so I'd try to get funding to build some sort of bear hang. Increased signage, or work on our signage so that it was more user friendly. So it wasn't just like, I mean, there was lots of old school signage that worked for a long time when tourism wasn't at like an all-time high, but now we have to accommodate obviously for a change in user group. So, working to have more like interpretive signage at Joffrey, because maybe if people connect a bit more with the history of the park, then they'll be a bit more respectful. I don't know, but I'd put forth like different designs for interpretive signage. yeah, just like different ways, maybe using like emojis in the bathroom to help people understand how to use because we got these new um, toilets that basically like separate liquid and solid waste so that the liquid can go into the ground, and then we'd fly out the solid instead of just digging pit toilets. But nobody knew how to use them because it was like a conveyor belt, and you had to use your foot to pump the belt every time you used it. So yeah, coming up with better signage so people can understand it, so they didn't just break this like $60,000 toilet.
Wow.
Yeah, so there was lots of things that we would put on the list. Most of it would, yeah, have to do with funding or staffing or situations where we didn't feel safe. So for a long time, the expectation was for me to stay alone up at Joffrey, which is like my first 2 seasons, to camp up there by myself, which was fine, sort of fine in the beginning when it wasn't too crazy, but as like, you know, traffic increased, it wasn't the most comfortable evening. So yeah,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah. And I read one article that talked about some of the comments that you would receive being a female park ranger from both male and females, and was wondering if you could just talk a little bit, because I loved your answer in it. I don't know if you know which one I'm referring to, but it at first you took offense to it, I believe, and like, you know, being, oh, you're a female park ranger, but then over time you pivoted your, I guess, like thoughts around it, and it kind of evolved to like a teaching opportunity. And I was just wondering if you could take a little bit of time just talking about how that like evolved over time, and like those type of comments, how you would respond to that.
So yeah, this is something that is sort of like an ongoing battle, even with like my Instagram page and doing things that are maybe not too true to the female narrative. But yeah, basically, like even from the first day of being a ranger, I would get comments on the trail about like, oh, you're working by yourself, that must be so scary, or like, oh, people would try to take the drill from me when I was putting up a sign and be like, oh, let me help you. I mean, not people, usually men, but on the occasion there would be women who would be like, oh, I would be like terrified to be a female and be out here doing this, and wow, you must be so brave. And yeah, in the beginning it like really pissed me off because I was like, I grew up with 4 older brothers, and I was like, I can do whatever they do. Like there's no, I never like really put 2 and 2 together that because I was feminine, because I was a female, I couldn't do things that the boys were doing. So, which obviously is, yeah, kind of like a ridiculous theory. So I kind of took offense to it in the beginning and would be like, no, did I ask for help? No, I don't need your help. And then kind of over time, I was just like, you know, there's so many people that just don't see women in this way. And it's like until you experience it and you kind of learn how to be comfortable. I mean, it's intimidating for a lot of guys. I'll say, like, it's intimidating when a girl like hikes past you and has like a bag of concrete in their backpack and they're going to like fix a culvert or something. And it almost like their initial reaction is just to be defensive, which, yeah, over time I just kind of started to mellow out about it and was just like, I'm just going to use it as like a chance to educate people and kind of, you know, help women, especially if there was women that were making these comments, to be like, you know, why do you think you couldn't do that? Or like, what about you as a female stops you from being able to be in a job like this, or like, you know, be in a trade or be in, you know, any sort of industry that maybe is male dominated. And there was a time where I worked in the office here where there was, I think it was female dominated. Most of the rangers were female. And they were all experiencing the same thing, you know, like there would be times where we'd get like stalked hiking up a trail by a guy, and we'd kind of have to like ditch off on a little secret trail to sort of hide away. And obviously like some uncomfortable evenings in tents where you would have to go shut down a party or something, and you'd be like, okay, I better have like a plan because this could go sideways very quickly. But so, I mean, there obviously are risks that you have to be aware of being female and working in an industry like that, sadly. But yeah, I kind of just took it as trying to educate more than like shame people for mansplaining all the things to me. But Yeah, especially with chainsaws. Guys really didn't like when I would carry chainsaws. I had one comment once where I was training a male staff that had just started, and some guy turned to him and was like, "Oh, you're letting her carry the chainsaw?" And I was like, "He's not even allowed to operate the chainsaw."
Yeah.
But thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah. And I get it on my Instagram all the time. I get lots of messages from people just, yeah, being like, "Wow, I can't believe that like you do that." And I'm like, "Why? Because of my gender?" And they're like, "Yeah, that's crazy." I'm like, "Well, we got to normalize it, so let's start now."
Oh, I saw like a
But
recent post that you, I mean, it's just about to go into winter, so you're like splitting a bunch of wood, right? And so, like,
yeah.
what you get a bunch of comments of like, "Oh my God, you're operating an axe cutting wood."
Yeah, it's funny because I'm using like a splitting maul that's a little bit smaller, and I mean I'm like 5'4", so I don't like if I use a large splitting maul, it's a lot of weight over my head, and so I use a smaller one. I have no problem. Like usually first hit, it's fine. I'm not sore. I train enough at the gym that this isn't complicated for me, but like probably got 30 messages saying, you could do yourself a favor and get a bigger axe, or like, if you had a bigger axe, things, would be way easier and you'd be better off and you could do it faster and you won't have wrist damage and all this stuff. And I'm like, and I mean, the axe I'm using is designed for splitting. It's not a hatchet. So, yeah, it just was really funny because it was almost like, if I'm not having a problem and I'm not asking for advice, then I don't really need it. So, I mean, I have a partner who's like 200 pounds, over 6 feet tall. He uses a full-sized splitting axe, and yeah, he sees how I'm doing it and it works for me. So he never says anything about it. But yeah, it just must have been intimidating or something. I don't know. And I made sure I posted a video just to show like the ease of the time I was having. I was like, this is no problem. So, but yeah, I just like now try to either like make it a topic of conversation or make a joke out of it, because sometimes I'm like, I actually can't believe that it happens. But
Yeah.
and I just wonder, I'm like, does this ever happen to guys? Like, do they ever get messages from other guys being like, "Oh, if you did this, it would be easier"? And I just feel like it doesn't happen.
Yeah, you know what? That's a great point. I don't think it would. Like, I'm
No.
very much an amateur to like a lot of these outdoor sports and like these
Mhm.
like mountain biking, for example. Like I've
Yeah.
started mountain biking out. We're close to like Three Blind Mice and a whole
Yeah.
bunch of other trails out here, which are amazing. I grew up in the prairies. It's flat land. There's not a lot of like, there's no downhill mountain biking or anything. So it's a
Mhm.
lot different out here.
Yeah.
I feel like if I posted a video of me doing some maybe like beginner slash intermediate, like a drop or something,
Mhm.
um, I don't know if I would get any comments of like unsolicited advice
Yeah.
to something. I know guys have a hard time not defaulting to putting on their Mr. Fix-It hat
Yeah.
and trying to solve a problem.
Yeah.
That's very hard for guys.
Yeah.
And I think towards like the opposite sex, I think
Yeah.
I don't know, it's just like a default, but like sometimes you don't, I know, best not to offer unsolicited advice.
And I mean, I have no problem. Like, I have no problem learning from the opposite sex, obviously. Like,
Mhm.
when I lived with
Yeah.
BC Parks, I learned a ton about like small engine repair and working with different tools and everything from like construction to welding to whatever. And I obviously like, because those are kind of male dominated areas. Well, I mean, it's changing now, but they have been for a long time. It's kind of natural to learn from a guy. And if somebody knows more about something than me, then I'm happy to, if I'm asking for education, I'm happy to receive it. It's more just like the comment just to comment.
Yeah,
Like, I'd
totally.
understand if I had posted a video and it was like, I'm hitting a piece of wood 17 times, and then someone's like, wow, like you're going to be really sore tomorrow. You should try this. I'd be like, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like funny because there's never really anything wrong, or, I don't feel like I need to change it, but then there's just always like lots of advice. being given,
Mhm.
which I mean is just like nature of the internet. People just love to like give you advice and share their opinion all the time.
Yeah, the
So
pros and cons of social media. And you have close to or a little bit over 27,000 followers on Instagram.
mhm.
Is that the only platform that you use, or do you use other
Yeah, I mean, I like write on my blog a bit. I have a Facebook page, but I've kind of put all my energy into
Instagram?
Instagram. I don't know if I could handle having anything else really. It's
Yeah,
like enough of a job with Instagram.
yeah,
But
totally. And
yeah, I'm
what's
always
that like having that many followers and how like what maybe just talk a little bit about like the pros and cons of
Mhm.
gaining a following that size.
Yeah, I mean, start with a good thing. So the pros are I've worked with some like amazing brands, so the networking's been really cool. So I've gotten to do work with Red Bull, with GoPro, with different ski brands, Arc'teryx, a bunch of other different companies. I've learned a lot about like digital marketing through that and how to promote product. I've met some athletes that I'd probably never be able to meet if I wasn't connected to those brands. Yeah, so the opportunity, it's been really cool because it's like an online resume that you can be like, hey, I've done this and this and this, and then people can like basically I've always looked at it as like a portfolio of not only like my life and my hobbies but also like projects and connections that I have. And I've met a ton of like really great people. Obviously I've met you through there, so that's good. But yeah, I met lots of great people, had a lot of really cool opportunities, got to try lots of cool gear and all that. The cons, there's also a lot of cons. I think just like in general, social media is not overly good for our mental health. I think you can learn to use it as a tool and look at it only that way, but it's an ongoing thing. So like you need to constantly be checking in with yourself and making sure that you're not comparing and you're not, making going out and doing things only for getting that photo or video or whatever. Um, and I mean, it can be dangerous too. Like you can get a lot of hate from people and messages that are not so great. And so you have to be able to kind of grow a little bit of a thicker skin to either laugh about it or, delete and block and move on. Because some of the things that can happen can stick with you. Like I've had people make like fake accounts and then just like attack random things like my partner, my dog, whatever. And yeah, so you just kind of have to be able to like deal with whatever's going to come. And and like one big thing for me is like you got to just like stay true to who you are. So like even when I've worked with brands, if I've suddenly decided to change, like, oh, I'm just going to get really into motorsports. I'm like, well, I'm going to post about it because that's like my life. I'm not going to pretend that all I'm doing is rock climbing and skiing because that's not what I'm doing. So, even if you shift audiences every once in a while, it's not the worst thing in the world. But yeah, it's just, you just got to kind of protect your mental health because it definitely can weigh on you for sure. And I mean, those apps are designed to kind of take over your brain. So you got to
Yeah,
put some boundaries up.
yeah, totally. You probably developed, I imagine, some thick skin too, having four older brothers.
Yeah. Yeah. Luckily, they were really sweet. So, like, there's 6 kids in my family. There's 2 girls so I'm the second youngest. I have a younger sister and then 4 older brothers.
Wow.
And I feel like by the time the girls got there, the boys were like done, like beating on each other, that they were really gentle when the girls arrived. Um, but yeah, I definitely just got thicker skin in general, just being from like a bigger family and like going through a lot in my childhood that I feel like, and I've always been like a little bit like my dad like rode dirt bikes and did backflips on BMX tracks and like has always had this like kind of adrenaline junkie vibe. And I think I'm like one of the few siblings that inherited that, so kind of saw that one coming.
Yeah, yeah. And whereabouts did you grew up in BC?
Yeah, so I was born in Kelowna, and then my dad was transferred. He worked for BC Tel, which became TELUS, and he was transferred to the interior. So we were in like the Cranbrook Kimberley area, and that's where I like went to high school, graduated, and then I moved out to the coast, and I've been here for almost 12 years
12
in
years.
Squamish.
And in how long in Squamish?
In Squamish for 12
Oh,
years.
in Squamish for 12 years. Got it.
Yeah, that was the first. I was like, I want to move to the coast. I don't want to be in Vancouver because I was kind of like used to the small town life, but I didn't want to be like in the middle of nowhere. So I just Googled some place on the coast with mountains, and then Squamish came up, and I had never been there, but I was like, I'm just gonna see how this goes, and then
Yeah,
I just didn't leave.
that's
But
amazing.
I mean, a
My
lot has
wife and
changed.
I was gonna ask, like my wife and I have been a couple times to Squamish over the
Mhm,
last, I'd say like 5 years. We've just done like kind of day trips, drive
mhm.
into Squamish, usually on our way to like Whistler for the day. But how has Squamish changed in that time? Because I think I'm gonna take a guess that it's changed quite a bit.
Yeah, so I think when I moved here, there was an article that came out about like the top 10 worst places to live in BC, and Squamish was like number 6 for basically like economy, um, culture, jobs, a whole bunch of other stuff.
Mhm.
And so I was like, oh crap, what did I get myself into? And at that time, there wasn't like a ton of like booming businesses. It was right after the Olympics. And so lots of infrastructure had gone up. So there was like tons of new condos and like rental spaces, but nobody to fill them because at the time people still didn't want to come to Squamish. And it definitely was like the pit stop between Vancouver and Whistler where you like went to McDonald's and then kept going. And so yeah, when I moved here, I rented like the first rental I found was like a 3-bedroom townhouse for like $900 a month,
Wow.
and that same townhouse now would be like $3,000 a month. So I mean, I think it was like 2012 when things like really started to skyrocket as far as like tourism goes. And yeah, so I mean, the vibe is very different. It's definitely gone from like rougher BC town to like lots of lots of money, lots of like transient people coming in and out, very much like your classic mountain town. It's a lot like Whistler in the sense of like lots of people come for different seasons. So people come for climbing and then they're gone. So it definitely has like an interesting community vibe. The people that I've been like friends with the longest are like people that have grown up here and are still here, and you know they'll probably move away, but like have a great relationship with the elderly couple across the street, and they've been here since the 70s. But yeah, lots of people my age are very transient, so I don't see a ton of I don't have a ton of like long-term relationships in Squamish because people come and go pretty quickly.
Hmm.
So you got to rely on just, your coworkers and stuff to hope that people stick around. But
Yeah, and I guess there's is it the sea to sky? Is it highway or?
yep, there's the Sea to Sky Highway, and then like a million other things named Sea to Sky, like the Sea to Sky gondola.
Yeah,
But
right. Yeah, yeah. And I have actually a friend from Summerland, but he grew up in Squamish, and he was a big rock climber. And we've gone climbing out here at Skaha
yeah,
Bluff
nice.
Provincial
Love
Park.
Skaha.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I just got into climbing, outdoor climbing for the first time since moving out here as well. How long have you climbed for, and what's the climbing scene like in Squamish?
I've climbed for like 10 years.
Hmm.
I climbed a little bit in the Kootenays, but not very much. It was more just like did some indoor walls and then moved to Squamish and got super into climbing for a long time. I mean, the climbing scene is huge in Squamish. There's lots of like world class routes, like top level athletes that are here all summer working on projects. Um, it's definitely clicky, I would say. It can definitely be clicky because it is like there's a lot of high level athletes and stuff, so you can definitely get sucked into that. But there are a lot of amazing people that you can kind of get into that community with. But
Excuse me.
um, yeah, it's definitely the access is like nowhere else I've ever been. Like even Skaha is amazing, but you got to hike in a ways for a lot of the walls. And Squamish, you could just like roll out of your car and like take 5 steps and you can climb some like splitter crack somewhere. Yeah, and like you can do a multi-pitch, you can go out bouldering. Like there's so much to do for as far as climbing goes. Um, yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. What drew you into climbing, and do you still climb, or have you shifted to other sports since then?
What drew me into climbing was, I mean, part of the culture, obviously. Like, I was always athletic, always doing things outside and being in the mountains. But then moving to Squamish, it was like kind of like a must that you did those things, whether you were a mountain biker or a climber. Now there's like so many other sports, like there's a whole like paragliding community and people doing all, and like the moto community and everything. But yeah, I don't know. I just really liked the movement and I liked training for climbing. I liked the way that my body feels climbing. Obviously, like the views are amazing, especially around Squamish, because pretty much everywhere you climb, you can see the ocean and there's like eagles flying around. For me, it was always like a big mental thing. Like that was kind of the only sport where I was constantly working on my own kind of mental state to get projects completed and stuff. And it is such a huge mental game, especially with like, not only is it like heights, but when you start placing gear, and if you're into traditional climbing or trad climbing where you're placing your own protection, which is a lot of Squamish, so it's not bolted routes everywhere. There are areas like that, but a lot of the granite and crack climbs are, you know, self-protected. So yeah, it is like a big mental game. I still climb, not as much because I have a torn ACL in my knee,
Hmm.
and when I twist it in different ways, it hurts. So I've taken a little bit of a hiatus this year from climbing. Also, I just felt like I went really hard with it for a lot of years, and I think it was just like time to challenge myself in something else. So yeah, I've been like kind of going from like granola cruncher to gasoline and doing the motorsports thing,
Mhm.
which I feel like was just a natural progression from doing everything kind of like all of this like human powered adventure stuff and then being like, oh, I'm going to try something else, see how it goes. But, and I mean, my dad for so long rode motorcycles and dirt biked and stuff. So I was like, well, I should give it a try. And also was just like a nice escape from crowds. So I've been like, because I've lived here so long and I've worked for parks and everything, it's like I've had my fair share of being around humans. So it's a nice escape to get on a motorbike and go into the middle of nowhere with no one else around, which is pretty fun.
Yeah, and what's the like term for that sport or activity? Yeah.
Like dirt biking.
Okay, it is dirt biking. Okay.
Yeah, there's like different things you can do on a dirt bike. So you can ride like motocross where you're on like a track and you're doing big jumps and stuff, or you can do like enduro and like enduro trail riding where you're doing more like technical, similar to like mountain biking where there's like different levels of difficulty on trails. So that's kind of what I'm more into is like the trail riding. So there's lots of areas in Squamish that are like developed technical trails for dirt biking. So yeah, I probably could have just started mountain biking, but I thought I would just skip that step and just start dirt biking. Just add some throttle and see how it goes. But
And
I
how
also just love motorcycles. So like when I was younger, like before I even drove a car, I had my motorcycle license. So that was like, I always wanted to do that. So yeah, it was
and
like
and
that.
and you go like all terrain, right? Like summer, winter, like in snow, doesn't really matter.
You can't really take your dirt bike in snow. There's ways you can. You can turn it into like a snow bike.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I only really care about skiing in the winter. I'm okay to put the dirt bike away, let it
Yeah.
sleep. But in Squamish, you can ride whenever it's dry. So like if in December, if it's like sunny and just cold, you could go out and dirt bike still because we don't really get snow on the ground for very long in town. So.
Mhm. What's the likelihood that a dirt bike could start from like a spark or something, like a fire? Is that likely, or is that like how likely is
It's
that?
like it's pretty unlikely, but also you can get these things called spark arrestors, which basically eliminate that problem. So my bike and my partner's bike have spark arrestors. So for instance, if we want to ride in Kelowna and or even in Penticton or something, because the terrain is so dry and because like fires can just happen out of nothing, yeah, you have to ride. You're not allowed to ride in those areas without a spark arrestor. So basically it just stops that from happening. So the
Uh,
chances are basically zero.
okay,
And Squamish, not so much because it's like pretty wet here. So it's not like legally you don't have to have one.
right.
But I haven't heard of anyone starting a fire with a dirt bike, but I'm sure it's happened.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't know if that was like a myth, or I'm sure maybe it has happened in the past, but wanted to
Yeah,
see
I
if
think
it
there's
was.
more people like throwing their butts out their window starting fires than than
Yeah.
dirt biking. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely an interesting transition. These people are like, you went from like granola crunching ranger to like moto head. But I don't know. I gotta try some other things. So whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. What do you like about the challenge of dirt biking?
It's just like nice to learn something new. I feel like I've been like comfortable in the sports that I've been doing for a long time. So it's been nice to have like a challenge that I kind of feel like I'm totally out of my element. Um, and I just like the adrenaline. I just really like it. It's like I don't know. It's not the same. Like you get adrenaline climbing, but it's almost like I don't know. The adrenaline with climbing is almost like a release of relief rather than like just this like really high energy that you get from motorsports. And I think I've talked to a few people about this that ride dirt bikes and stuff. And yeah, it's just like it just does something to you. You just feel really like it's almost like being a human and like sort of helpless in a lot of ways, and then you get on a machine that's so powerful and you're like, oh wow, but then you're in charge, so you're like, whatever happens is like the bike didn't do it, it's me. So like if I crash into something, it's because I made a mistake, not because of the bike. I mean, there could be times where you have like something mechanical, but it's very rare that like you're going to crash because your bike did something. It's usually because you did something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just been like, and it's like a new community of people. Like it's not a huge town, so like I know a lot of the climbers and skiers and like alpinists and stuff, but it's like I didn't know anybody in the motorsports community, so it was kind of cool to like, and it is a bit more of like the old school Squamish, so like a little bit more of the people that were born and raised here that are still doing some of those things. So yeah, I don't know, it's been cool.
Do you also get to just, I guess, discover more? Like, if you were to mountain bike, you would be
Yeah.
limited to more of the trails, but you could really, like, how long is like a typical ride? Like, do you go all day? Do you go like how many hours are you out on a single ride?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It kind of like depends. That's the best thing about it is like you can have an hour and you can go out and like rip 3 trails in an hour. Where like if you were mountain biking, you'd have the climb probably to get up for an hour and then you get to go down. So you definitely get to cover a lot more terrain. When we go out, we usually go for like the whole day. So we could ride like, depending on how long the trails are, we could ride like 6 or 7 different trails and kind of like go through an entire map of an area, which would like is super fun because you get to see so much different terrain and stuff. There's also like some rides we can do on logging roads that there's one here that you can ride for like, well, it's like a total of 80 kilometers. You can ride 40 kilometers one way and you get basically into West Van and you're like, the road's called Indian Arm and you get to like where the ocean is. It's amazing.
Wow.
And I mean, you could drive there in your truck, but it's like way more fun to go with a little crew on your dirt bikes, and then yeah, it's super fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, you get places.
Like if someone wants to get into that, what kind of like tips or recommendations would you have for people? Like if they're going out on their first ride, say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it definitely is like have the right protection because if you crash, it hurts a lot more than mountain biking
Yeah.
because, like speed's involved. If you're on like more compact, like gravel roads, or if you're riding tighter trails, like you're gonna basically be like ejecting out of the bike in a way. So yeah, make sure you invest in like protection. I know a lot of people that get started in motorsports and they wear like jeans and a jersey, and I'm like, it doesn't take very much for you to like shatter your elbow or something. So definitely get the right protection. And yeah, definitely try. I would recommend like renting or going and taking a course and trying out different styles of riding. So like 4 strokes are very different from 2 strokes.
Mm.
So 2 strokes are pretty peppy. A lot of them are like, a lot of power very quickly, where 4 strokes are a little bit more gradual. So some people prefer to have that, especially if you're like pretty new to riding. If the first time you get out is on a 4 stroke, it's a little bit more gentle and forgiving. So definitely get out and like try bikes before you want to invest in it. And maybe you'll just hate it. I doubt it, because I feel like once you ride one, you're like, okay. I always tell my like friends that mountain bike, I'm like, they're like, oh, are you going out riding? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, if you tried it, you'd stop mountain biking.
Really,
So,
eh? Yeah.
but yeah, I don't know. It's like any sport. It's like, don't just jump into it, and like the learning curve is steep. So like you can hop on a bike and ride it in like no time at all. But in order to learn techniques to get over logs and do, more technical trail riding, you're going to need to invest some serious time. So I'm definitely getting my butt kicked.
Yeah, I went down a little bit of a wormhole because I saw, I think it was from your story, you like highlighted someone that followed you and they're like a famous dirt
He's
biker.
like he's like one of the best dirt bikers in the world. He's from the UK. He's won like countless races. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. I
Yeah,
was like, I
yeah.
was like fangirling really hard. I was like, was this an accident? This must have been an accident.
No, that's
But
so
then I was
cool.
actually having a conversation with him, and he was like super friendly. He was like, oh yeah, if I'm ever in Canada, like I'll give you some tips, and maybe you can like give me some ski tips. I was like, oh my gosh, what?
That's awesome. Yeah, I like checked out his Instagram and was just like, oh yeah, this guy is next level. He's got almost like 1 million followers, and I was
Yeah,
watching just some of the riding that he was doing, and
yeah,
I mean,
the
it
races
looked
are
like
crazy.
he was going just up a mountain, zigzagging, and there wasn't a trail. He was just like creating it. And
Yeah, he just finished this crazy race. It's called Romaniacs, and it's basically like I can't remember exactly how long the track is, but he rides for like 20 hours straight. And it's just like to end it, you like go through it like it's you're doing all this crazy technical trail riding, but then you're also going through like buildings. It's like it's nuts. If you ever want to just like really enjoy some entertainment, just YouTube Romaniacs and watch some of those clips because they're crazy. But
Romaniac.
yeah,
Okay, I'll
Red
have
Bull
to
definitely
check.
has a lot of good moto coverage. It's actually like I think it's one of the most entertaining sports to watch because it's like the stuff that they do, you're like, holy crap, this is crazy.
Yeah, and I was watching one. It was a course in
Mhm.
Sydney, Australia, and he was just like riding down a hill, and then there's a ton of people, and then he was just like riding over logs, like
Yeah.
all the way towards the Sydney Bridge. And I was just like, wow, this, yeah. And he was going fast. I was like, oh my god, yeah,
Yeah, they're pretty amazing. What you can do on those bikes is crazy.
yeah,
Even like just like yeah, being in kind of like the beginning stages of learning how to like control your clutch and throttle and everything is like it all is a lot more technical than it looks. Like you'll watch someone do something like hop up on a log or get up some crazy steep hill and you're like, oh, they're just like pinning the throttle, but it's not. It's like so much more than that. There's a lot of steps. So
yeah.
yeah.
Like a hilarious analogy that I'm sure most like dirt bikers would be like, what is like if you've ever done curling before?
I have gone curling one time.
Yeah, so like you watch curling and you're like, oh yeah, they're just sliding and then they just like let go. But to be
Yeah.
really good at curling takes like there's a lot that's going on and it takes a lot of
Yeah.
practice and there's a lot of skill to it. Obviously, it's a lot different than dirt biking, but
Yeah.
it's one of those ones that you watch people do and you're like, oh yeah, but to actually do it is is another thing.
Yeah. Another reason too why I got into dirt biking is because I was on SAR for so long and because Squamish is so busy. So there's like in the summer there'll be like multiple calls a week, multiple calls a day of accidents. And a lot of the accidents and um, casualties and stuff that have happened that I've witnessed have been with like climbing, skiing, base jumping, people getting lost, whatever. But I haven't really had any experience with rescues with people on dirt bikes or snowmobile. Like I've had a couple snowmobile calls, but that's kind of it. So I feel like for me, it was kind of like a fresh start with something where I like didn't have trauma because
Yeah.
there was definitely so I had like a friend that passed away in town and he was climbing and it was like not a great situation. And that was kind of like the moment for me where I was like, I think I got to try something. I got to do something else because I have like this drive to do sports, but I don't yeah, I gotta like heal some of those spots before I fully enjoy them again. Because I think like worst case scenario is always like in the back of my mind. So
Totally. Yeah, no kidding. Um, do you surf at all?
I've tried surfing. I'm not much of a water person.
No. Yeah.
I don't
Fair.
really like. I didn't join the Swift. I did like my like bare minimum for Swiftwater, because when you're on the search and rescue team, you have to have your like Swiftwater awareness, which is basically like everyone should have Swiftwater awareness. But I never really pursued that because and it's funny because I worked as a lifeguard in high school and I just don't like water. It's very weird.
That's fair. That's fair. You're a land person.
I'm a land person. I'm a land mammal. I like the mountains. I don't like water.
Yeah. And skiing, I got into I learned how to ski at Big White when I was 7,
Nice.
and
Yeah.
then that was just on a ski trip one winter, and then the remaining 20 years we didn't do any ski trips till we moved out here, and have gone skiing a couple times over the last season or so.
Yeah.
And what type of skiing do you do, and how long have you been skiing for?
So I mostly do backcountry skiing now. I don't really get ski passes anymore, except for like the occasional day pass at Big White, because when I visit my family who have moved back to Kelowna now, I always go to Big White because it's so cute there. But yeah, I love it there.
Yeah.
I've been skiing for maybe like 15 years. So I first learned how to ski in Kimberley on like the tiny, tiny little hill there.
Mm.
I snowboarded before that and then got into skiing. And yeah, I've basically just been backcountry skiing for the last like 6 years. And yeah, intermittently going to Whistler. But yeah, that's kind of where my passion is. I love mixing the aspect of like being able to go out and hike on my skis and then get some like amazing fresh tracks in. And I mean, the backcountry is obviously getting busier and busier, especially with like this season and COVID and people wanting to stay away from each other. But there's still some gems that I know where it's really quiet. So
Mhm.
yeah, skiing's definitely like my first love. It's like the one thing that I think I'm actually pretty good at. I'm like, there aren't like that. Like I'm like a Jill of all trades. There's lots of things that I'm like, you know, intermediate at, but I feel like skiing, I feel like I've put a lot of time in. So I feel
Yeah.
like it's like my favorite thing to do.
Yeah, that's like
My
soccer for me.
legs also suck.
So, and backcountry, for those who have never gone before,
Mhm.
what is backcountry? What is involved in that?
So you need to have a special type of ski and binding, which is an alpine touring ski and an alpine touring binding. So basically how that works is like usually it's a lighter weight ski because you're carrying it on your feet. And the bindings basically, for a visual, like they attach to the ski, but then there's usually some sort of lever or some sort of system where you can lift your heel up so you can walk. And then you'll have like a special AT boot, which is more flexible, more sort of similar to like a hiking or alpine boot, so you have more flexibility for movement. And usually it consists of like going out, usually like on crown land, or there's lots of designated. You can even tour off of lots of resorts.
Mm.
Usually like areas that are not patrolled, they're not groomed. There's no one making snow for you. You're in the mountains. And you're in parks a lot of the time. So like if you're in Squamish, you can tour in Garibaldi Park. Lots of people can tour right from like you just drive for a couple kilometers in park, and depending on the season, you can just start hiking. Yeah, so you can hike into the backcountry. Obviously, you're in avalanche terrain, so you want to have lots of training and continuous training, basically for your whole life to understand weather and snow and the snowpack. And yeah, you just go up, you hike, you pick your line, you ski, you hike back up, or you get a snowmobile and then you go and then you ski and then you get on the snowmobile. There's a bunch of ways you can do it. I'm not saying which one is better, but there's some ways.
Yeah, it depends how much skiing you want to do and how much hiking.
Yeah, so we do have snowmobiles, and it's mostly for like, we still have long days where we go out, but it's mostly for access. Like you can spend 3 hours on a logging road Or you can take your snowmobile for 5 minutes and then park and then go tour into the high alpine and ski. So yeah, we do that a lot.
Nice.
But for a very long time, I hiked a very, very long way to go ski before I invested in something to speed the process up. But
And so how long would it take to like hike up, and then how long would it take to like ski down?
so usually if you're going from like the valley and maybe you're driving and parking, you could be touring for like 5 hours, maybe more before you're doing a downhill run. And typically if you're doing that, you're maybe only doing like a couple good runs and then skiing out. But it's kind of like touring's like it's a whole like adventure aspect of it. Like it's not just about getting those runs in. If you want to do that, then you get a snowmobile.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's more just about like being out with friends and being able to have that like cardio hiking aspect still throughout the winter. Yeah, and then skiing in the mountains. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow.
Mhm.
How has your relationship with nature changed over, say, the last even like 5 years?
My relationship, I think I'm a little bit more like doomsday a little bit with the state of the world, but I mean, I think like nature is still like one of the most amazing and like mysterious things to me as I'm like looking out my window watching the clouds go through the trees. I've always had like a really special connection, especially with like working alone in parks and like being out and being with wildlife and going to some like less populated areas. There's always like something very like that pulls me and draws me into nature all the time. But yeah, I definitely feel like a bit sad when I think about the relationship between humanity and nature. And yeah, I just feel like there's a bit of a disconnect there. And over time, it's been like just trying to sort of like understand why I feel that way. And I don't know if it's like just becoming more cynical from working in nature with people and just seeing like that disconnect, because it almost was like this social experiment of like, we are part of nature but we put ourselves in a different category, and then there's just like that loss for people, which I think is where I get my like pessimistic view sometimes. I'm an optimist in like the sense that I want things to go well, but I kind of see like where we're making a lot of big mistakes when it comes to, I mean, like myself, as soon as I can get an electric powered dirt bike, I will, but I can't right now. So, I mean, we all are like doing our best. I mean, a lot of people are doing their best to try to like minimize their footprint, but I share a vehicle. I don't commute anywhere. I live off like wood stove heat. So I feel like I'm always trying to adapt a little bit to reflecting on my impact. But yeah, my relationship is complicated with nature. I love it, but I also think that it just makes me a little bit sad.
Yeah, for sure. And
Which
I
I think
think a
is like
lot of,
most people.
sorry.
Oh, I was just saying, I think a lot of people feel like that, especially just like even like waiting for these election results to come in from the US. I'm like, how can it even be an option that people don't believe in climate change? Like, it's just so strange to me that we have to fight, like, we have to basically fight to prove that nature is valuable, which is just so strange.
Yeah, totally. And I bet you a lot of, especially people in BC would resonate with that, especially the longer they've spent their time in BC, the more change that they've seen. And
Yeah.
it's a province that has changed so much over the last 4 decades that
Mhm.
it's yeah, it's wild. I saw one comment actually on, I think it was the Why I Quit My Dream Job article from,
Mhm.
I think it was a past ranger, but it was someone in Washington.
Yeah.
And they had mentioned about how in Washington they had done a good job. There was a nonprofit organization that did a lot of trail work, and
Mhm.
I think did a lot of the stuff that you experienced that were pain points in your job.
Yeah.
And I wonder if, I mean, there should be an opportunity for a nonprofit to start and do that. Both my wife and I joined the Penticton and Area Cycling Association, or PACA,
Yeah.
which is mountain biking. But I mean, they cover, I think it's like 6 to 9 mountains and
Mhm.
like thousands of kilometers of trail, and they do a lot of trail maintenance and that. And they're a nonprofit.
Mhm.
They rely a lot on donations and I think grants as well. But is there not something like that in Squamish that could help support rangers?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of volunteer groups that come out and do trail work. So there's like Friends of Garibaldi, CPAWS, the BC Parks Foundation. The problem is that because it is volunteer, they're able to do like some small projects and help where they can, but because these issues have grown in such capacity, it's like it's not enough like to rely on just these volunteer groups to come out, mainly because of like the influx for tourism and how, you know, overcrowded these areas are. Also, it just, I feel like in a way it's kind of good because like where is the accountability for the people who are supposed to be in charge of parks? Like why do we have to rely on people to do labor for free in order to protect an area that's supposed to be protected like from our government? So I don't know, in a way I'm like, yeah, it would be great if there were more groups going out and helping out, but on the other hand it's like people are supposed to be getting paid to take care of these places, so they should kind of have some accountability.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, totally. Have you researched and seen any really good examples of other countries that have done a really good job with I don't know, just supporting the environment, and maybe like national parks or something, either in maybe in the States or maybe like in Europe or anything like that?
Yeah, I don't know, I haven't done much research. I've really like narrowed into just being really angry about BC parks, but
Yeah.
I mean the States has got its own like line of problems. I mean rangers are, there's a little bit more of them, they're more like highly trained in the States. I think they've done a good job at keeping their rangers valuable, so like it's not like this mysterious person like you would expect to see a ranger in a park in a national park in the US. So yeah, I think I'd have to do more research, but
Mm.
I think it just comes down to like politically what people are doing right. So if you look at like Scandinavian countries or like in Iceland, like I think that they're doing a good job protecting their areas, and I think that comes down to who's in charge. So yeah, I think politically we just need to do better, and then maybe people will start to make it a priority if the people in charge are making it a priority.
Yeah, and
But
also the people that are in charge, and like what is their relationship with the environment and nature, and how connected are they to the land that they're
yeah,
overseeing, right? I think there definitely needs to be some sort of, I don't know, should be mandatory, like
yeah,
time spent out in nature and exploring the, there's so much out there to explore, and not
mhm,
look at it like dollar signs, but actually make sure that it's, a balance of
yeah.
and just making sure that it's protected.
Yeah, I think there's definitely like a huge lack in education. So, I mean, like Tourism BC, like Explore BC and all that, they do a great job at like promoting tourism here, but they don't do a ton of education. So, like, I think it could start in schools, and like it's great when you can take an elective for like an outdoors program, but not everybody can do that. Not everyone does that. So, it's kind of crazy that you can just go out to these places without knowing anything about it. And it would be so cool to see like BC Parks get funding to develop a program where it's like a whole bunch of interpreters that go into schools and talk to kids about nature and how to be outside and how to leave no trace and all that. But it's like, yeah, that's never really made a priority. And we always tried to do that. Like at work, we'd try to like, I'd try to take time out of my day to like, instead of, you know, just writing someone a ticket, to be like, do you know why you can't have a fire in the Alpine? Like, it's not because like we we don't think it's a good idea. Well, I mean, we don't, but it's not just because there's like no reason behind it. It's not like a power tripping thing. It's that like, you know, plants and foliage that grows up here takes so long to grow at a higher altitude, and you know these fire scars, you know, damage the land. They can, you know, leave residue for animals. It's all this kind of stuff, but it's like there wasn't a lot of time for education because it was always like every time you turned around there was something wrong. But I always tried to take time to like educate people because it's not their fault a lot of the time that they don't know. Like if you were raised in a city and your parents never took you outside, or if if you're not privileged enough to enjoy the outdoors because of your living situation or whatever, like it's not like people want to be like that all the time. It's just that they don't always get the opportunity.
Yeah, totally. And I think one obvious thing that I think people could do, even not being someone who hasn't spent a lot of time outdoors, is to just like clean up after themselves and not leave like trash when
Mm-hmm.
you are out exploring. But is there other, you would think, obvious things that people should be doing, but they just don't? Like, what was the most common repeated educating that you had to do?
Oh, it would definitely be feeding wildlife. So
Hmm.
the wildlife up at Joffrey, there's all kinds of things. We've got like the bigger stuff, so like bears, um, obviously like deer, that kind of stuff, but also these little guys called pikas, which are kind of like, they're almost like a mix between like a mouse and a rabbit, but they're like this cool little creature that lives under rocks. They're usually in like higher alpine areas. Um, and lots of whiskey jacks, so like these really beautiful birds. And basically you can't walk through that park without either like a pika or field mouse or something running out and coming at your feet to get food, or a bird coming and landing on your shoulder. And like this is not normal behavior for these animals, but they just get fed, and like they're overweight and they're sick, and a lot of times they don't go back to their young. So if like a whiskey jack has had an interaction with a human, they don't always return back to their babies. And obviously, like, we know that feeding bears is not a good thing. Like, we have signs on our highway being like, don't feed bears. But it's just like there's a weird disconnect between like getting that like rush as a human of interacting with an animal and understanding that it's not good for them. So that was definitely the hardest thing. Was like I would get like so angry. I'd tell a group of people like, please don't feed the birds. They, as soon as you leave, they don't know how to look for their own food anymore. So like there's that, as well as like a whole list of other things. But and then I turn the corner and there'd be a whole other group feeding a whole other animal or whatever. So yeah, I don't know where that kind of went so wrong, but that's probably the most common thing I would see. Was like, yeah, people like, I don't understand how people pack all their food and stuff into the backcountry and then they eat it and then it's way lighter to carry out, but they leave it there. It's just like, yeah, there's a lot of things that I'm confused about, but that's also like humans just make some questionable choices. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
and even going to like the parks in Winnipeg, you go to the duck pond and everyone's feeding ducks and geese
Mm-hmm.
bread. And I don't
Yeah.
know why people, I don't know, they just, yeah, I guess they want the animals to come closer, but
Yeah, and
it's
it's like an
so bad
influence
for,
thing too. Is like it started with like, I think there was a big hype about feeding whiskey jacks at Joffrey because of like photos on the internet. So people would have these like amazing birds that were like on their hand or on their head or their shoulder. And so like you see that and then you think it's okay and then you go do it. So I mean, even though I'm like have been using Instagram for a long time, I've always said to people like, don't look at an image and just like assume you can do it or assume it's okay. Like do your own research, because like even if I'm out skiing somewhere and someone's like, where is that? A lot of the times I won't tell people because I'm like, I don't want to be like, I don't want to have this like liability on myself that I've encouraged you to go somewhere that you weren't skilled enough to get to, or you didn't do your research and you end up in a crappy situation. So yeah, I don't know. It's just like people need to think for themselves a little bit more when it comes to that kind of stuff.
yeah, totally. And yeah, that's like the downside to like marketing the great
Yeah.
outdoors.
And I got a lot of like, because a lot of people were like, oh, these parks were ruined because of Instagram, or like there's a lot of articles that have come out about like, these places would have been fine if it wasn't for the internet. And like, yeah, there's a lot of truth behind that. Like people see it and then they want to go, but I
Sure.
mean, it's like pros and cons to everything. It's like this amazing, like all these places should be enjoyed and people deserve to go enjoy them. And I think sharing images of your experience is like kind of something that we'll always do as humans, is like here, and like some people can't get there, so it's great like for my parents to be able to be like, look at this, like you're probably not going to hike like 12 hours to the top of this mountain, so I can show you some pictures. But I think it is just about like, yeah, we just have to be a little bit more careful on the internet. Like if we know a place is overrun, let's stop geotagging and saying where we are. Like I think it's okay to like leave a little bit of mystery. So I never, unless it's like, you know, Squamish is like a general location, I don't location tag for any of the places that I go, because it's just like, you know, the social media is always going to be there. It's just, you got to find like smarter ways to work around it. And I think like parks could have started an initiative like that when things started to get busy, where they were like, come enjoy our parks, but like, let's not location tag. And just like, you know, if you start a trend like that and you get people that are super passionate on board, then like we saw this in Jackson Hole. So Jackson Hole was like experiencing a lot of overrun areas, and they were like, stop, this is in the US, and they were like, stop tagging, like stop location tagging. And like people will find it, but they'll find it from like doing their own research, and then hopefully through that rabbit hole they actually safely go out and enjoy it. But yeah, I don't know, it's a double-edged sword, that social media.
It is for sure. Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is. Well, something that I think would kind of offset the doom and gloom that I know that you're a fan of doing is art, and was wondering if you could just talk about how you got into art. And I've seen some of the stuff that you've done. Is it primarily watercolors your medium, or do you do other do you dabble in other stuff?
Yeah, so this kind of all started when I was a ranger. You'd get laid off in the winter, so you could like take a winter contract, or you would just get laid off and start again in the summer. So in the beginning, when I didn't have much seniority, I wouldn't get the winter position, so I would just I'd take the winter off. And if it was like not a great ski season and it's like pouring rain, I was like, I gotta do something that's not like athletic. So I mean, I could go like running in the rain, but I didn't want to do that. So I was like, I'm going to explore like my creative side. And I have a lot of siblings that are like graphic designers, or they do a lot of art. So I was like, I'm going to try my hand at painting. So I started with acrylic painting and did that for a while, and like actually sold quite a few pieces, which was cool. And then
Amazing.
So go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, that's amazing.
And then I went traveling in the UK and saw, I don't know, I like saw some watercolor paintings in a cafe, and I was like, oh, I should try to do watercolor. I know it's like really hard, but I'm gonna see how it goes. And then I started just like doing it in a little book, like when I was out like walking around, whatever, and then just got super into watercolors. And that's just like, it's kind of like how I like zen out when I need to slow down, because I'm a little bit hyper. So
Yeah.
it's a good, like, I used to read a lot as a kid and do a little bit of art, but I need something where it's still like hands-on, but I can slow down. So yeah, painting's definitely been a good outlet for that.
Mm-hmm. And do you find the paintings that I've seen, it's mostly landscape that you've
Yeah,
got?
I do kind of a little bit of everything. It's like I get into like, I don't know. I'll get like inspired by something and then try, like I'll do landscape for a while and then switch it up and do like skulls with flowers coming out of them or something. But yeah, I just like, depends what mood I'm in. I did some under the sea yesterday. It was great.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you find that you what you're painting is a reflection of what you're feeling in that moment?
Sometimes I think. Like, I know I do a lot of landscape and like nature paintings when I haven't been outside for a while. For sure, I'm like, I make like a little escape in my art. Sometimes it's just like, there's like different styles you can do that are more satisfying. So if I had like a really stressful day, I'll do like blotchy flowers, because it just like is a nice release. It's not too technical, and I can just like kind of like doodle. So yeah, sometimes it more is like an escape from reality sometimes, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Have you thought about what your new dream job would be?
I don't know what my new dream job would be. I'm more on the fence of like not really believing in dream jobs, but just like finding something that is comfortable and feels good to do for work, but then allows for like enough flexibility to do all the things I love. Because I don't know if doing something you love as a job is great in the long term.
Mm,
I think it ends up making what you love a little bit tainted, and I think that's what happened for sure with parks.
yeah.
Because like there was a while where like I haven't been back to Joffrey since I worked there, and that was like my favorite place to be, was in that park, but for a long time. But then yeah, it just got so tainted that I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I ever want to do a dream job again, or if I just want to find something that, yeah, something I can do, but then enjoy all my hobbies.
Totally.
But I'd like
Yeah.
to work for myself, because I think that I know freelance is hard, but I think that I've just got so much going on in my brain of like things I want to try and do, that it'd be nice to create my own schedule a little bit, which I think a lot of people would like to do. But
Totally. That's the one benefit I found since starting Douglas Marketing, like just over the summer. So like in June, I got incorporated, and having the flexibility in my schedule has been amazing.
mm-hmm.
And then
It's just like way more
also,
productive.
yeah, totally. And like working, yeah, being in complete control of my schedule is great. I also have like no drama at my work because it's just me. So that's great.
Yeah, like all the staff.
Yeah, like all the staff, the work culture is great.
My boss is super
Yeah,
chill.
yeah, and then I also am like you, where I can't do the same thing over and over again. I need
Yeah.
to be constantly reinventing and like coming up with new exciting challenges. And
Mm-hmm.
I get to, in a sense, pick and choose what, who I want to collaborate with, what projects I want to take on.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that sense, it's been different every day. There's pros and cons to it as
Mm-hmm.
well. But in terms of like feeling challenged creatively, that
Mm-hmm.
I don't think will ever go away because it will constantly change.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think I'm just like scratching the surface of what I'm what I want to do. So we'll
Yeah.
see.
Yeah. And if there's a
Also, like,
way,
who knows what the world will do? So,
yeah.
we're in a pandemic still, and there's an election that's probably going to cause some drama. So,
Oh
yeah,
yeah. Yeah, totally.
I
Um,
think I've learned a little bit to like disconnect from. I think what the biggest thing with the parks job is to learn to like remove my career from my identity, which is I think really hard for people in North America. Is like we really define ourselves by what we do for work, and like that's the first thing in conversation is like, what do you do? And I think I don't think it's healthy. Like I don't think being super like seeing yourself as your work is like, I mean, you can be proud of the things you accomplish in your work, but I think having that as like your sole identity isn't great. I think it's like if you can define yourself as a person and find all the things you love, then work is just kind of like the secondary thing that pays all your bills.
Yeah, totally. And maybe like a better question to ask in a conversation. In Winnipeg, you talk about like, yeah, what do you do? And talk about the weather. Oh my
Yeah.
God, that is all we talk about is the weather. And it's the same, like, what it was in August, it's really hot. In
Yeah.
January, it's really cold. And like, I don't
The
know,
same.
we talk about it all the time because I
Yeah.
think it's just like, are you feeling what we're feeling? Like it's so hard, and you like go through it together. It's weird, but
Yeah.
we spend way too much time talking about the weather. But
Yeah.
anyways, I think a great question, alternative question to ask would be like, what are you excited about right now?
Yeah.
You know, I think that would probably elicit something that's current, that's not maybe long lasting, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I think asking that as opposed to what do you do, I have a hard time with that too, because it doesn't really elicit like an exciting response. Like if I was
No.
just answer that as, yeah, I'm in marketing,
Yeah.
it's
People are
not
like,
that
okay.
exciting of an answer.
Yeah.
But I do a lot of different things, but I don't
Mhm.
really know where you want, like, where do you want this conversation to go?
Yeah. And I just think it takes away from like who you are as a person, because like you're not defined by the fact that you do marketing.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, it's definitely like some food for thought.
yeah, for sure. What sort of things are you excited about during a pandemic and an election aside?
Oh, I'm really excited for this upcoming season for skiing. I'm excited to see if my training for my knee injury has paid off because
Mhm.
I'm not sure yet. Because you can't really like it's super hard to replicate skiing in your training. So I've been like doing a lot with that. So I'm really excited to just like see how the winter unfolds. And I'm excited to work on some more having some time to work on some creative projects. So I'm thinking of doing like a little art calendar or something that I can just kind of like side hustle with. So I'm excited to do some more like art projects. And I always do that like slow down in the winter and try to be more creative. So yeah, excited for that. I don't know.
Nice, that'll be good. What sort of what programs do you use for like social media? Do you use Canva for like any graphic design stuff?
Yeah, I've used Canva. I've used like Photoshop, Lightroom,
Yeah.
like Premiere Pro for videos. Um, yeah, I don't know, pretty much everything. I've used like the GoPro Quick app,
Yeah.
GarageBand, all that stuff. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, for art, obviously it's just like I do it physically with paper, and then a lot of times I'll just like take. It's hard with art, like you gotta have a really good setup to either like a really good scanner or take high quality images to duplicate it. But
To
yeah.
do prints.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some good places in town you can get them done. But basically, it is like getting just a super high res image of the art and then printing copies. But I usually just do like flash sales of my art. So like because I don't know, I don't always feel like going and making copies because you just don't know how they'll do. So I just like putting it up, and then if somebody wants to buy it, then I kind of keep like the same sort of pricing depending on size. But yeah.
Yeah. And some artists, like I know my mom's an artist, and I've always thought, oh man, you need to paint more. And I think like I know I just have like a business mind all the time, and I just think I
Yeah.
could like make money doing it. She's retired, so but she has done some commission work, and she was just saying about how the commission took away the like creativity and enjoyment of the art. She just
Yeah.
enjoys doing art and the process, and just didn't want to like commoditize it. But
Yeah.
do you have that challenge?
Uh,
Obviously, you've sold art before. Do you
mhm.
find it some that it takes away from the creative aspect, or how do you deal
Yeah,
with
like if I get like a request to do like like copy a specific image or do something that someone wants to purchase, then I feel a lot of pressure and it usually doesn't come out exactly how I would have liked it. So I prefer just to like do art and then see if it'll sell later. And if it
that?
doesn't, then whatever, I just did it anyway. But yeah, I don't really like doing commissions because of that. Yeah, it feels like
You
there's
have
just a
to
lot of
fit the
pressure.
framework.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure, and it's like if people already have expectations of what it's going to look like, then it takes away from like your artist creativity. But yeah.
Good point. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What sort of like challenges are you interested in taking on in say 2021?
I would love to do a race on my dirt bike. I would love to do an enduro, like a simple enduro race, not something like that Jarvis is doing where he's like climbing up rocks. But I'd like to do, I don't know, I'd like to set some goals as far with that sport so that I'm like constantly progressing and kind of like doing something with it, not just going out. But I'd like to have some goals set for that, and then um, probably try to mend my relationship a bit with climbing
Mm,
and some of those sports that I'm still kind of like working through with search and rescue and stuff.
hmm. Yeah, just a couple more questions, then we can wrap up.
That's
And then we
okay.
can
I
go into
just might say my partner might walk in the door, but hopefully he doesn't yell some ridiculous thing at me. But he'll be in the background.
don't worry. Um,
Lunch break.
what what sort of I know you do so many different like a variety of different like activities. So
Yeah.
how do you view like health? I saw one part where it talked about and this goes back to like male, female, like comments that you were getting made, and how you have like, you know, you don't obviously you don't really care about like the pretty dainty version of
Yeah.
a girl, and you're more about like, I just want to get as strong as I can so I can do all this stuff. Is
Yeah.
that is that still how you currently view health? And what, I don't know, like, yeah, what's your opinion on that?
I'm just very pro like create whatever body works for you. So like for
Mhm.
me, if I want to stay injury free in all of these sports, I do need to train and I do need to take care of my body. And obviously we know that like eating healthy and exercising is good for us. So I take advantage of those things. But yeah, I think everybody's different, and it's like some people thrive on, you know, just getting out there and doing stuff and not spending a ton of time in the gym. But I also really like the gym. So, and it feels good to me to like, you know, lift my bike up or carry gear and not feel like sore the next day. So I've always like prioritized that, and then tried to like move away from like um, the idea of what I should look like. So like if my shoulders are bigger or my thighs are bigger or whatever, it's like that's because they're like serving a purpose and they're helping me to, you know, achieve my goals. It's not, I don't need to look a certain way to do things. So yeah, I've always just had like, that's always been my view, is like just create the body that works for you, and then yeah, that's that.
Yeah, for the goals that you're,
Yeah.
or activities that you're working on at that
Yeah.
event.
It doesn't mean that it's for everybody. It doesn't mean that like some women aren't going to want to have big broad shoulders, and that's their choice. But for me, it's like, yeah, that's what I want to do. So
Yeah, what's your current like workout, or I'll just say like active like schedule? Like what's typical like week look like, or does it just vary so much?
yeah, it kind of depends on like what I'm training for. So like for skiing, I'll try to get to the gym to do like very like leg specific workouts, usually like 3 times a week if I can. But if I'm doing like sports in between, then I usually will end up maybe like once or twice a week at the gym. But now that the weather's changing and I'm not like dirt biking every day or running or climbing or like chopping wood, then I'll be able to get into like more of a routine. So when I was training like for climbing, I'd be at the gym like, I don't know, 4 times a week
Mhm.
or maybe every second day. But yeah, it'll change a little bit. Like as ski season comes up, I'll probably try to get there at least like 3 days a week and having like good rest days in between.
Yeah,
But when you're like doing sports and training at the same time, it's like it's all exercise. So
yeah,
it's like you
yeah.
don't need to be at the gym as much, but you still need to like maintain all the work you've been doing.
Hmm. What sort of leg exercises would you recommend that for skiing that are really good to do?
A good mix of like cardio, some balance stuff and stability, and then like weight training. So like for balance, you can use like a Bosu ball and flip it over and do some like single leg. There's a whole bunch of like a variety of things you can do on a Bosu ball, but um, working on like single leg stuff, you can do
Mhm.
some like pistol squats, box jumps. I ride the bike a lot at the gym, mainly because I'm like trying to strengthen out my knee. And then you can work with like either using tape or like some gyms have a floor ladder that you can roll out. You can do some like drills, some like single leg, double leg drills through those, which works on like bit of stability, bit of cardio. Um, yeah, and then there's all the things like squats, like weighted squats, leg press, leg extensions. I don't know. There's like a million
Yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah.
But I'm working a lot on stability right now because I did tear my ACL, so I'm trying to like work on doing movements at the gym that aren't super predictable so that I can build up those little muscles around the knee.
Hmm.
I'm trying to avoid surgery because I had a lot of improvement in the first few months, which is like kind of a good indicator of whether or not, you know, it's going to be okay. So, yeah, we'll
It's good.
see.
Hopefully it'll be a speedy recovery.
Yeah.
Staying active is good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. This
Yeah,
is good for you. It's good for
yeah,
your brain.
yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Is there, before we sign off, is there anything that you'd like to highlight, or I know ask of the listeners, for them to do? Any like last parting words?
Final thoughts.
Any final thoughts?
Um, No, I would just say, like, you know, if you want to try something, do it, and don't be afraid if there's like stigma around it. And it's not always like that easy. Sometimes you have barriers, but yeah, just get out and try stuff. Try to mend your relationship with nature and be a voice for your parks and for your protected areas, because the people that are in charge are not, their voices are not very loud. So I would say, yeah, those are my parting words.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much for just taking the time and space to chat with me. I hope that it resonates with a lot of people. And yeah, thank you so much
Awesome.
for everything.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This was super fun.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Well, thanks so much.
Awesome. Okay, I'll see you soon.
You bet.